Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Genius Awards Podcast 2024, because it's been 3 years since we last did this. Perhaps for good reason. But we're back, because this year, I think there's a lot to talk about, and I'm very interested in hearing everybody's takes, because there's been a lot of, interesting things that have happened, as well as cool things. I think a lot of these awards are rather competitive. Joining me today, in real life, is XNimus, who is standing across from me.
He stared into my soul in real life.
We are recording
there are three
in
of
the
us.
same room.
There are three of us. X is mostly here to shitpost and do emotes in the video feed.
Yeah. And then joining us third is Grunkle Squeaky from Australia.
From Australia. From the land down under.
Yeah, the Australian Grunkle Squeaky is here with us.
I'm Australian Grunkle.
Yeah. Joining us for real is Jackson, who will be able to give us a lot of insight into a bunch of orgs this year. He's played a lot, he's watched a lot, so.
I played 1.5 orgs this year, which is more than most people.
He's a well-educated man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has good takes, I think. Except on
K-pop. We'll see. We'll see how good the takes are.
Alright. But without further ado, I think we should dive in because there are a lot of awards this year. I think I counted 49 or 50.
You're insane.
Yeah, some of these are probably going to be relatively quick, but some of them are probably going to require a lot of discussion. So without further ado, we're going to start with the main match awards section. We're going to go from top to bottom for anybody following. Oh, also, just before we actually dive in, this podcast, much like the awards, will feature Gambit Game spoilers throughout. Mostly unmarked. I'll try to call them out and be like, we're going to talk about Gambit Game, but I might not. So if you haven't watched it and you want to be unspoiled, I would recommend you go watch that first before listening to this, just in case. I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee anything, so.
I won't even try.
Okay, well, if X isn't going to try, unfortunate. But yeah, without further ado, we will dive straight into the main match awards, starting with best themed main match.
What if we spend 30 minutes on this one award?
We're going to spend so much and this is the original main match this year that used its theme best in its mechanical design. So, do the themes connect intuitively with the mechanics? Do they enhance the gameplay experience? And the main match that does this best is the deserving winner of this award. We have a bunch up for nominations. Unlike last time, I'm not going to read them all out because there's a lot and that's going to eat up a lot of our time. If anybody wants to start, I'm open to listening for what people think about this.
Yeah, I highly recommend having the Google Doc with all the nominations open while you're watching this. That's what I did in 2021. Yeah. My first shout for this award is going to be for Bouquet Arrangement in Contractual Obligation. Fantastic main match. I feel like the name, you're just arranging flower distributions with other people, and I think it just creates a really dynamic, intense set of actions with your main match, which it works out really well because even though there are only 3 submissions that you're making the entire game, I feel like there's just so much depth with what you're able to do and what you have to analyze.
No, I definitely agree. As someone who also played that game, I think it's a standout way to start the org. It's a very good main match one, and I do think it fits the description of this award very well. I think the way the main match frames its pairing mechanics, and how it's you're giving bouquets to each other, makes it a lot easier to understand. Because otherwise, I think it's kind of a crazy mess of a mechanic that's sometimes a little difficult to wrap your head around. But the fact that there's some sort of real analog that grounds it makes it a little more possible to wrap your head around the mechanics. So I think it's really well suited. Do you have another shout?
I liked Presence of Mind a lot. I think it's very straightforward. You're giving presents to other people. That would also be one I like of the main matches that I played. Mm-hmm. Of the other games, I think I would also give a shout to maybe Prepare or Despair. I just feel like, the entire main match is a quest to get items for the mission for the entire meta storyline of that org, mm-hmm. And I just think it's like definitely one of the main matchups that works the best with the overall theme of the game, overall theme of the org, as well as like, you know, the main match itself, if that makes sense.
No, I definitely agree. I think I'm gonna cough, so we're gonna cut that. But I think the main match works really well, and I think its thematic coherence is one of the strengths of that game. Everything has a reason, and there's like a lot of narrative beats that happen. You have to go to like these locations and talk to people and do mini games that make sense at the location, and it creates this very RPG homey feel that I think makes the game really special. And I think that's the reason a lot of people like it, because it really feels like you're preparing for an adventure. So I think that's a good shout. My personal shout, I have two, other than the ones you already mentioned. I really like Memories of a Lost Season and Simulacrum. I think that game is it's clearly a top-down design, and what I mean by that is it takes a different concept from a different game and then applies it to the Genius. And so in this case, it takes Obra Dinn, which is a fantastic game, by the way, and then applies it or adapts it to a Genius setting. And I think it does that fantastically in a way that makes the theme really work well with the design, because the gimmick of the game is basically that there is a Genius org that has happened at some point in time, and you have to figure out who won it, who got eliminated each episode, by listening in on different snippets of the season, different memories of the lost season, if you will. And I think it's just done extremely well. It's very delicately crafted as a logic puzzle, and there were a lot of cool deductions. For example, you had to like learn the rules of the deathmatch to understand who was in a winning position or who had lethal in certain positions, which I thought was a really interesting way to do an Obra Dinn style puzzle in the Genius. So I think it's just done extremely well, and I had a lot of fun playing it too.
I think the cherry on top is the deathmatch rules that you learn in that main match became like the actual deathmatches played within the episode.
Yeah,
that's true.
My understanding though is that some of the rule sets were like a little bit opaque for the death matches. Was that
I
a
agree.
problem? Or...
I think there was an issue with, I think the observation game was really difficult to understand with what exactly counted as a loop of arrows. Just a little opaque, because one of the games basically was like, oh, you had to find circles of arrows that were like all pointing at each other. But it was very difficult what that meant when you started going on 3D surfaces, because they started doing like insane shapes and volumes.
Yeah, I mean, that perfectly befitting a meme org.
Context, this is a meme org. I think that you can't knock it too much for that.
That's true. So, and then the other one was, there was a strat game where you had to, there was some rule, it was for balance, like it's absolutely necessary, but I think you had to,
you can only win or lose on your turn.
Correct. So you had to like prevent your opponent from being able to find lethal, and it had to flip back to your turn, for example.
Something crazy like that.
Which was a little unintuitive, but I think it was, I don't know. I mean, it was still fun. It was a really funny gimmick. It's perfect for a meme org. Great way to start.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then the other shout out I had was U-Boat Shootout from Gambit Game. I think the game is like really well themed, and I was also kind of like not involved, but I was there when it was being designed, and the way it was designed was basically Sam saying, I want a submarine game. What does a submarine game look like in the Genius? And then he just took that idea and ran with it. So it's very much a design that's inspired from its theme, and I think you can tell. I think it makes sense that the islands give powers. That's a really, thematic way to do different power-ups. And obviously, like the submarines being hidden and being separate justifies a lot of the mechanics of the limited communications. So I think the game is just thematically very coherent.
Yeah, it felt very similar to Captain Sonar, which we played in Epic Mafia Genius at Final 3. U-Boat Shootout, fortunately, being much better than that game.
Yes, and it also played out fantastically, which I think also helps with some of the rose-tinted glasses. All right, do you have anything to add?
No.
Oh yeah, you have to ask your opinion.
He has nothing to add.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, we can move on.
Well, I mean, do I have to worry about like what's being like? Do I speak freely and then like if it's cringe, then I'll just like rest assured it will be cut?
No.
You can ask to get.
So I have nothing to add.
Okay. I mean, You should speak your mind.
Well, I mean, like, my question is, like, do you, like...
This is going in the,
Yeah,
the
sure.
cut.
Well, my question is, like, it was defined as, like, games that best used its theme in its mechanics.
Uh-huh.
But, is there, like, any element of just considering, like, I like this theme, therefore I vote for this game?
I think so.
I think that's
But that's not what the description says. It says that used its theme best in its mechanical design.
That is true.
I think also it's just because it's easy to come up with a really cool theme. It's much harder to execute it well. And I think that's the part the award is trying to recognize.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I will say I'll probably vote for Bouquet Arrangement over Prepare to Spare, which are my top two, mostly because I think the graphics and like really, really sell the flower theming in Bouquet Arrangement, whereas there isn't really like a close equivalent to that with Prepare to Spare.
Yes,
That's
it is.
fair.
There is a lot of graphics for that game, but it's mostly buried outside the rules, right? You have to initiate the mini game and you get the puzzle, which is like this giant graphic.
I saw a lot of bot commands, and that was my visual experience as a spectator.
I think all three of us kind of struggled. I tried my hardest to follow it, and we can talk about this later, but it's almost impossible.
I think it was definitely easier to follow a single player and what they were doing over the course of the main match rather than everyone.
Yeah, that's fair. I should have just
I tried PRCS.
Should have just chosen like Pengu or Uri or something and stuck with it. Alas. All right, let's move on to the next category, Best Early Game Main Match. The best original main match this year that was designed for the early game, which is defined as 10 plus players in the standard 13 player Genius org. Could change for different sizes. I'm going to start by saying I think Bouquet Arrangement deserves a shout out here as well. I think it's a really strong main match one. Very good at doing everything a main match one aims to do, right? Introducing people to social dynamics, getting people to talk to each other, getting people to plan with each other and figure out what they want to do. So yeah, I thought it was really good. And honestly, I don't really have any notes on it. I think it's just a really strong, solid main match one design. Probably one of the top ones we've seen in the past few years.
Yeah, I think it's honestly my favorite MM1 that I've ever played, and quite possibly my favorite MM1 that I've ever seen as well. It's just such a strong game. I wish I could articulate clearly why I like it so much, but I think it just forces you to interact with everyone in a way that really just forces you to, I guess, just make different inroads with each player. It's kind of hard to say, but you're doing different things every round. So the way in which you interact with each player in every single round is different. You can't really just toss some player to the side. It's just such a strong game. I like it a lot.
There's a lot of built-in asymmetry because you're making these bouquets, and that forces you to diverge in how you interact with different people. And so sometimes you're forced to pair up with someone that you don't think you haven't really talked to yet, which I think is a really strong element of main match one design. As you're playing the game, you'll realize oh, I need to talk to this person, so I'm going to go talk to them. And that's exactly what you want to encourage when you're starting off an org. I think an underrated part of the design also is the different win cons. This game had multiple different win conditions. You could have the highest score, the second highest score, the lowest score, or you could have the highest score that didn't share any flowers with the first place person. I think it just allowed for a lot of dynamic ways to approach the game. It wasn't really easy to just majority alliance it, but it was also very clearly leading alliances into a certain direction that allowed for healthy gameplay. So
yeah, I'm in absolute agreement with that. And I guess moving on from bouquet arrangement, I just want to say that this category as a whole is super strong in my opinion. I think of the thirds that we have, first third, second third, third. The first third is definitely my favorite section. I like bouquet arrangement. Group theory from CO, I didn't really love at first, but I think looking back at it, I think it's a pretty strong main match as well. Element shift from vote, that was my nomination. I don't think it will win, but I thought it was just a really fun game as well, if a little generic. But the actual game I want to shout out is Swap 61, which I think is quite possibly the strongest main match of 2024.
Like, I think the genius of Swap 61, I will say this, as someone who watched it being played and also kind of helped
Did you write the
proofreading
bot?
it. Yeah, and then I also helped set up the bot. Is I think the game looks deceptively... Like, it takes a while to really understand what you're doing in the game, and also, like, what the core mechanic is. But once you do, I think it's incredibly elegant.
It is so complex. It is such a complex game, but it is so fun.
Yeah. For context, for people who are missing out or didn't watch Variations on a Theme, which is the org this was played in, the way this game works is basically, as the name says, you're swapping tiles on a grid of 61 hex grids. That's like really simplifying it, but that's pretty much what it is. And you score equal to like the distance between your nodes after all the swaps.
Your two nodes. Each player has 2 nodes, and you're trying to essentially just maximize the distance between the 2 of them on your grid. And they change after each round.
Correct. And of course, it's a Variations on a Theme main match, so there's a small unique twist in each round that also, spices up the game. But the game is actually extremely complex, and it's kind of difficult to visualize what the largest or longest path is. So Sudo and I wrote a bot that does it for you. You could just like do a command and be like, what happens if you do this swap? Which I think immensely improved the gameplay of the main match. It was definitely the right thing to do, because you don't want people to make decisions without realizing that, oh, this isn't actually how the longest path works.
Yeah, this is like an incredibly fun main match, where again, it's like a game where your interactions with every single player matters, because anyone can do a move that can absolutely ruin you. So a lot of the time you're trying to play to like the game theoretic, like best outcome, but it's kind of hard to like know what that is immediately. It takes like quite a bit of time to, look at the grid and use the bot commands to figure out what's going on. But through all of that, I just thought it was such a fun experience.
Yeah, I think
there was a moment though when I was like at the Hiroshima like atomic bomb memorial, and Arshia like DM'd me being like, "Get the fuck on now, swap my tile for me." And I was just like, I don't know if I can handle this right now, Arshia. Like, we gotta chill for a moment.
Yeah, I just remember it was a game that really encouraged interesting social conversations and dynamics. Like, I think the other thing is Swap 61 is, like, I think the unique main match 4 in this set. Everything else is, like, a lot of main match 1s and main match 2s. And that's generally because main match 1s and main match 2s are generally, like, where people put a lot of their effort in to make a strong first impression. I think it's so impressive that Swap 61 is, like, a main match 4 and is still able to create interesting social dynamics, make interesting gameplay decisions for everyone in a way that feels really organic. There's no obvious majority strategy. Like Jackson said, it's so easy for one person to fuck everything over, but there's also a lot of opportunity for cooperation and trying to like minimize risk, or trying to figure out ways that you can most maximize your thing, assuming that there's a rogue agent. Like, it just has so much complexity, and I think every variation also just really enhances the game. Like, every variation was perfectly placed and timed in such a way that the game really got that extra jolt of energy it needed, which is exactly what the variations are supposed to do. So yeah, it never got stale. It was always dynamic. It was super fun to watch. As a host, everybody talk to each other and be like, do you want to do this move? How do you feel about this move? These swaps fuck over me, but it doesn't fuck over this person, so maybe I'll just take the L. Like, a lot of things to discuss, and in a relatively simple gameplay mechanic. There's one thing you do, you swap tiles, that's it.
Yeah.
So.
One last thing. There have been like discussions like a few times throughout the years of like a org entirely comprised of like reran main matches. Like, of course, I think Squeaky also did this, but some org where the entire like the best main matches ever are like reused. I would recommend using this one for anyone that is listening to this and is considering doing it. Swap 61, consider it.
You got it, Jackson.
I think it's like, I don't know, I think
X.
it's one of the strongest main match 4s ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, I do want to give a shout out to Prepare or Despair, which I think was also really good. I think it's just overshadowed by some of the other games for me personally, but it has so much effort poured into it. It has so much care and love, and I think it shows in every aspect of that game. So I can't not mention it. Memories of a Lost Season is also good. I don't know how good it is as like an early game main match. It's very innovative and new and fun, but it doesn't really encompass all the different like early game mechanical nodes you really want to hit as a main match one, which is like having people talk to each other, creating social dynamics. But it's also weird because it's a meme work, so like who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a super strong category, like top to bottom. Every game here deserves to be here. And honestly, it could be a contender to win pretty much every other year. It just so happens this year we've got a crazy set.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to give out a shout out to Prepare or Despair as well. It's just in a category where like my top 2 main matches the entire year are in this category. So it's just tough.
It's very tough. So the next award is Best Mid-Game Main Match. So this is the same thing, but in the mid-game instead, which is 6 to 9 players in a standard 13-player org. There's a lot of good ones here. Is there any particular one you want to start with, Jackson?
I think the vote games were pretty good. Flickering, I'll just go top down. Flickering Lights. I thought this game was okay. But the social deduction aspect of it was pretty useless, and I just wasn't a fan of the core mechanic of the game overall. It's all right. It's just not really my sort of thing. I didn't enjoy engaging with that game that much. Hexagonal Highway, I think, is a very, very good main match. I think I nominated it. It's another grid-based game where... if I remember correctly, you're trying to essentially like launch yourself as far as across like the hexagonal grid as you can. And you score points based on like, how far you go. Another really fun game. The twists or the variations were all very good in my opinion. The one thing that kind of held this main match back was more so like meta concerns, like it was a 5v1 where one person in the 5 was throwing to DM Amaranth.
Yeah.
So gameplay wise, not very exciting, but I do think this is the strongest contender from vote, at least for this middle third. Oh, and Presence of Mind, also a very good game. It was used in Mainly by Design, so if you know it there, then you know how it went down in vote pretty much. I also think it was really fun. It's definitely like my top 2, along with Hexagonal Highway.
Yeah. Presence of Mind, for those who are unaware, was basically inspired by Sudo's Mainly by Design game, which was Past the Present. So it shares the mechanic of passing presents, but pretty much everything else about it has changed. So now the presents each have a unique effect. Instead of the presents being designed to have layers, they have like all these special effects. And in addition, there's like less of a social deduction aspect to it and more of like just a straight social aspect to it. So there's no social deduction in this really. Because in the original you had to like figure out which present has how many layers from each person. Not necessarily social deduction, but like there was room for like sight, because like maybe they passed you a present with 3 layers and you had to like unwrap 3 layers or whatever, and then it explodes and you die.
Yeah.
But it's very inspired by that game, but I think it really perfects it and distills it down into exactly what it should be. I think the vote mid-game main matches are a little weird because there's a lot of throwing involved in a lot of them. And so they didn't really play out to their best potential. I think these are also games I would be super interested in seeing be rerun in any sort of org, because they're so mechanically refined, but some of them couldn't shine as much as they probably should have because everyone was trying to kill Amaranth. So
Presence of Mind was played fairly straight up. So
that's true.
That went well. Yeah.
Yes.
I think like that's an interesting point. Like just brought up like with the mid game like main matches. Like with early game, you want to like set the tone and like encourage like social dynamics and all that. I feel like in the mid game you kind of want to prevent like these stagnant like alliance wars.
Yeah.
Like also.
Yeah.
And that can be hard to do. But I think like I'm sure this is a good game. But I think like if a main match can like effectively kind of prevent this kind of situation, I think that would speak to it for this award.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair. I just think in any main match, it's really hard to prevent an NV1 where one person is willing to throw
I agree.
to kill the one.
Yeah.
Like pretty much no matter what. Unless it's like entirely individual, in which case I don't really think it'll necessarily be that fun anyway.
Yeah.
I think like given that limitation, I found Hexagonal Highway to be really fun. And I also found Presence of Mind to be very fun, just not as fun.
Yeah. Yes. I'd like to give a shout out to Speed Day for 8, which I think has a really solid baseline design of basically the game is there's these different rules that govern how you score points with cards, and you have to trade with people to assemble hands, right? I think the game is just really simple and solid, and I thought it was fun to watch play out in Gambit Game. And there's a lot of room for maneuvering, so I thought it was really good. And someone lied effectively in that game, and I think that's always a plus if someone is able to lie effectively in a mid-game main match and kind of get away with it. Because I think there's such a...
I'm going to pretend I know what you're speaking about.
I just think there's such a meta...
I agree, Marcer.
Yeah.
You're speaking facts, bro.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think the game was very conducive towards what X was saying, which was like disrupting some alliance dynamics and forcing new dynamics to emerge, which is kind of what a mid-game main match should ideally do. Instead of just preserving the status quo and getting people to gang wars. Gang wars is always pretty boring, isn't it?
Been there, done that.
Me too, man.
Was part of the problem.
Amaranth was his own gang.
Amaranth was his own gang, all alone. So, anything else you want to shout out? You want to talk about the game you played?
No.
No?
Fuck you.
You don't want to talk about Doppel?
Whoever nominated Doppel Doubt must really fucking hate Wimp and Cake. Like, that's all I have to say. I think base design of like you like a territory claim, you claim a shape and then you place it on the board using priority cards. I think it's a solid design. It's a fair game. I think like just remove the guest, that this uncontrollable variable who you can't interact with, or like you can't like signal, hey, please make this move, or hey, I'm gonna do this move, don't fuck me over. Like there's no counterplay to the guest. Like what?
Yeah, X is just the jester. The jester is allowed to just, screw someone over and make them end up being in the deathmatch, and perhaps both of those players who got screwed over ended up being eliminated. Who would have thought?
But I guess those two players happen to be social threats, so I guess it did its job to disrupt the status quo.
I don't know if we want to disrupt the status quo like that.
Not like that. No, I mean, like I think the game is balanced. It just needed to remove this one mechanic with air quotes. And it's a solid game.
Yeah. Cool. Any other thoughts? I mean, I think the category is also pretty tough, but me personally, I think I'll be voting for the votes. The votes are pretty good.
Yeah. We can move on.
Let's go. Best late game main match. This is the final third, so 3 to 5 players in a standard 13-player award. I think late game main matches are extremely difficult to design. Like, we obviously have the obvious F3 problem, but F4 and F5 are also pretty delicate to design for. You can easily design a game that sucks in those categories, and
I think what makes main matches is like it's a game of strategy, but there's also like social elements to it.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want your social elements to be, especially with so few people, you don't want it to just be like we have 4 people, goodbye 1 guy, or we have 3 people, goodbye 1 guy, or we have 3 people, goodbye 2 guys. Right? Like you want there to be social elements, but you don't want there to be like too little room to maneuver, and you want it to be social, but you want people to be self-interested since it's endgame. I think that's what a late game main match should do, and I feel like U-Boat Shootout does that pretty well. With like different.
Yeah, so I'll actually ask something about U-Boat Shootout.
Yeah.
In Captain Sonar, the EMG game, I thought that randomness, with like, the locations that you're shooting, was quite bad and hard to deal with. Was that the same case for U-Boat Shootout? Because I got the sense that it could be a problem.
Define randomness.
Like, you don't know the locations of the islands on the board, right? So
no,
you could just
you
like get
you
really...
do know where the islands are.
Okay.
There's something to play around.
Yeah.
And your I don't know how it was in the original game, but like your range of shot, if you do a direct hit, you do 2 damage to like another boat. If you hit adjacent to them, you do 1 damage. So it's like your range is effectively 5 because you're shooting a cross on the square grid.
Yeah. So I think the reason U-Boat Shootout works and Captain Sonar maybe doesn't is the fact that the islands are there and the islands are visible to everyone, which adds a concreteness to the game. So basically, like, there wasn't as much randomness because, for example, a play that happened in Gambit Game was there was one island that was clearly like really strong and everybody wanted to go for it. And so Grunkle played around that and was like, I'm going to shoot where you can shoot at that island. And he hit a bunch of people doing that because he was able to be like, this island is good, so people are probably going to be here, I'm going to shoot there. And so because the islands are open to everyone, it gives reason to opening strategy. There's a reason to prefer to start in one place over another, and then you can counterplay off of that and then counterplay off of that, etc., etc. So it actually plays off really well. And the game ended fairly quickly. There weren't a lot of people just missing. A lot of the hits were hits, which to me speaks to the fact that the game is actually really engaging because you can, if you sit down and like think about it, figure out generally where someone is, right? And it's not just like, oh no, I'm just going to shoot at C5 because C5 is funny.
Yeah, okay. So by contrast, in Captain Sonar, I don't think a single person was hit. The game ended because I had to go to the bathroom, and so I lost a life via inactivity. And then I think Jet went like AFK and also lost a life due to inactivity. So essentially, just Toby won by sitting at his keyboard. So not the worst way an F3 main match is played out, but it's like up there.
Yeah.
Is Toby there right now?
He's not here.
This is so sad. He's not at his keyboard right now. This is tragic.
But yeah, I think U-Boat Shootout really deals with a lot of the difficulties of designing a late game main match and turns it into strengths. For example, like it adds limited communications, but the limited communications isn't like a complete lock. You can talk to people. There's a planning period before where you can come up with like different strategies and I'll avoid hitting this island so you can avoid it. And then also if you die, you join someone else's submarine, which means that it kind of like transforms into a team game.
I also like that aspect of the game where like if you die, even if you die early, it's not the end of the world. You still have something to do. You have to analyze the board state and like just hedge your bets on who is most likely to win, if not you.
Yeah, the guy who died first didn't end up in the deathmatch.
Yeah, crazy.
He survived, so...
That's really funny. Do you have anything to say about the penultimate test or either of the ZGD noms?
So I personally really like the concept of the penultimate test. For those who don't know, the game is the final main match before finals in contractual obligation, and it takes... The goal of the game is you start with 5 people and you somehow narrow it down to 2 so that you can actually do a finals, right? And the way it does this is kind of wonky. Each round of the main match is its own mini main match. So for example, if you have the highest score in round 1, you get a mini token for that round. And then someone is also the EC of that round. And so one person loses a life every round of the game until you're down to just 2 people with 1 life each. So I think it's a really interesting take on solving the quote-unquote endgame problem, right? You just narrow everybody down 1 round at a time. And the other interesting thing, so basically if you die, right? So if you die in round 2, right? You lose the deathmatch. You're treated as if you no longer exist for the other rounds, right? And that might change the way other people score or do well, because we all submit what we want to submit for each round, and then we do the death matches. So basically, you can look at the board and be like, well, this person's submission is really bad for me. So that's the person I want to eliminate, right? And that will influence who you token and who you DMO. Unfortunately, it didn't really play out that way, because I think every player involved made a decision solely based on connections that were made before the game started. So perhaps it's a bit of a shame, but I think the game really tries to encourage that amount of thinking. It's just the social structure of that org was particularly very rigid by that point. So
yeah, I'm sure that DM between you and Admirer was entirely based on the events of that main match. Nothing outside.
Yeah. We only, it was strategically the best decision for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give a quick shout out in that case, I'll give a quick shout out to MetaQuiz.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go through this quickly. Final 5 main match. I thought it did a limited communications twist really well, where each round you can choose to open up comms with someone twice per person max. I thought it was just really cool, and the questions were really fun. Each round you also do like 10 questions. The downside of this main match is that, it's kind of hard to fight back if, it's like a 4v1 or whatever, and that did end up happening. But there's also enough room for a counterplay with the individual questions, which were worth a lot more points. So I don't know, I thought it was really fun. Interesting game.
Yeah. I do also I do want to give just a quick shout out to Runes to Ruins, which I thought was a pretty neat idea. Each person basically made their own symbol or rune, and you had to deduce what other people's symbols were by using different types of like cluing methods, which I think is a really cool idea for a game. And yeah, so I thought it was cool. I think the other things are just a little bit better, but I think Runes to Ruins is also just a really, really solid design.
Mm-hmm.
Best depth for min rules. This is an award we struggle with every year, and we need this award every year so that we stop increasing the lengths of rule sets without any sort of...
We tell these designers, stop yapping in your rule sets. Please. We don't want to read.
Yeah, so the award basically celebrates games that are able to have short or, decently short rules and still is able to preserve a lot of depth and gameplay experience. There's a lot of nominees for this category. My first shout out is honestly Addition Crypt from Variations on a Theme. I think that game is really simple in its base mechanics, right? You basically add points to like a different location, or I don't know, it was a node, right? It was called a node. So you add points, you basically select nodes, that's pretty much all you do, and then based on which nodes you select, points are divvied up differently. It's super simple. The rules themselves are like 2 paragraphs long, or half the paragraph where one of those paragraphs is detailing like how you distribute, like how many tokens of life there are, whatever, right? So super simple, played out extremely well, was a really good main match one. It hit all the bells and whistles of like, oh, you want people to talk to each other, you want it to be socially dynamic, you want, alliances to form, but you don't want a majority lockout strategy. So I thought it was really strong.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with Addition Crypt as a pick for this category. Unfortunately, I did not find the game to be very enjoyable, so I will probably pick another vote me match for this one. But Addition Crypt, good game. I can certainly see why someone would pick this for this category in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So actually, I think my choice, it's going to be between Bouquet Arrangement and Swap 61 again. Again, I just think Bouquet Arrangement offers like so much depth. Like you have to consider every single action with, I guess, just like a... I'm trying to think about how I want to like describe like the amount of consideration you're putting for every single player in CO, but it's just a lot. I have to refresh on the main match rules one.
Don't worry, X is reading Edition Crypt rules right now.
No, I'm reading Swap 61.
Yeah.
Oh, he's reading Swap 61.
Well, I'm not reading, I'm just like checking the length of the rules. It's pretty short. I just scrolled twice.
Yeah, it's pretty short.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, the reason why I think I might choose Swap 61 is because, and this is so funny because when we were initially talking about this, I was like, there's no way that Swap 61 deserves to be nominated for this category. But the rules are pretty short, and even though I spent like a ton of time like analyzing the grid to see what the best swaps were, that like kind of like proves the point, right? That despite how short the rules are, I felt like I had to spend a ton of time, wrapping my head around what was most optimal for me and what was most optimal for every single other player.
Yeah.
In that game.
To play a little devil's advocate, Swap 61 does require a whole as script and robot to be able to parse correctly, which
that is true.
Yeah, I think the rules themselves are really simple. I think the issue is exactly one line of text, right? It's player score based on the longest distance, and longest distance is non-trivial for people who like don't do computer science, right? It's not something you can just look at a board and be like, oh, that's clearly the or like the longest shortest distance, right? Because you want to lengthen the shortest distance, because if you do just long distance, you can just go across every single tile and find some path. And so you need a bot for that, which I think does make the game a little unintuitive. Otherwise, it's super min rules. Like the submission is min rules, the way the game works is min rules, because all you're doing is swapping. Right, you swap tiles, and then you basically give an amount of tokens to like say, I want my swap to go first, right? I want it to be the highest priority. It's all you have to do. Very simple mechanics, but the way the scoring works is a little unintuitive.
I would actually disagree with that devil's advocate argument. I feel like you coded like a bot to help with calculations. I feel like that's just like you make a game about making equations and you're like, here's a calculator, feel free to use this. Like, that's how it feels to me. I don't feel like that's like a knock against like the rules or the game.
Yeah, that's fair. I just feel like the game was impossible to play without the bot, but
yeah, and that's why you provided it, which made it a better experience.
Yeah, I can see both sides of the argument with this one. I think I lean more on the side of it was a UI element that was provided, and I just functionally see it as a fundamental part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the vote and CO designs really emphasized elegance, and I think it shines through in this category. Like, the rules were pretty easy to understand, so yeah. All right, let's do Best Main Match to Spectate, which is a crazy category. It's a new category we came up with, and it's basically the main match that was most engaging to watch happen live, right? The design helps, but it's also like, what did you enjoy?
This is low-key a player award.
Yeah, I love how all the Gambit Game main matches are nominated, like 5 different ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit cheating when your show is like edited and parsed out to show all the good points. That said, though, I will say, I think U-Boat Shootout, right, is a standout. It was fantastic to watch play out. There were so many hype moments and a lot of great calls from all the players. I think the best part about U-Boat Shootout is it's engaging because all the players are so impressive. Like, Grunkle makes 3 or 4 right calls in a row, decimates Alex pretty much on the spot by being really intelligent with where he shoots, and then Nolux in turn just has superior strategy on top of that and decimates Grunkle. And then Joey is like, well, I have to flip a coin, so I'm just gonna 1 in 4 based on what I think Nolux's previous movements were. And he sits there and he's like, I think this is the most likely spot because Nolux tends to move like optimally, and this is pretty optimal or whatever, and then he hits like the 1 in 30 or something, right? So incredible to watch play out. But I think the other one that was super engaging is Triangle Auction, and I think in some sense it might have been more engaging because U-Boat Shootout almost feels like an action movie. You're watching things explode and people die and all these crazy things happen. While Triangle Auction...
You're watching the people explode.
Yes.
Yeah.
While Triangle Auction feels more like, I don't know, like a drama movie, right? Like it's a thriller. You're watching all these people with clear interests all try to vie for these pieces and convince other people that their interests are better for other people than other people's interests. It's a really complicated mind game with a ton of different arguments and everybody trying to make their case. Because like the game design just really facilitates that super well, right? It's a super simple game about making triangles, but there's a surprising amount of depth that's created from just auctioning off side lengths and being like, okay, make a triangle, right? You can buy something to screw someone over. You could try for a specific combination that gives you, super high risk but high reward. There's a lot to think about, and the gameplay just constantly changes because you can quickly adapt your strategy. So, I don't know, I thought it was just a joy to watch and all the different agendas and interests being pushed.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Triangle Auction was also ran in EM Genius, was the best main match from that org in my opinion, was also, I think, engaging as a spectator experience in that org as well. So it doesn't surprise me it was good in Gambit Game.
How do you feel, XNimus?
I agree with those takes. I think Red Blue Gold game also probably a fun one to spectate, especially for like the first episode. It felt it was a very simple game. I felt like the strat that was the winning strat ultimately felt very reminiscent of like season 1 main match 1, like the 9-win strat almost. It's like you're not like going for the simple like I'm just gonna normally like on my own as an individual go for the most points I can get as an individual. It's an entire alliance just pooling their resources to like push one person in a way that like was not like initially the most intuitive strat, especially like since it's like the first game of the entire series. And also like I think they also kind of abused like the time aspect of it, or like
the time limit. Stalling people out.
Yeah, I think that was pretty funny.
That didn't work. That's also the funniest part. Like they were stalling it out in the main lobby when everybody was already done with their trades. So it was like completely pointless because everybody like did them early. It was like, we're just gonna finish our trades and sit back and let the other team do whatever. And so they were just sitting in the main hall making these trades like extremely slowly while everybody else was like just resting in another room.
That's really funny.
Jackson, do you have any shouts?
I think so I was gonna give a shout out to main match 3 Farmers Fields in Nilnot. So as a spectator, this is basically Gold Chaos, the main match.
Okay.
And I think like another element of this main match that's like really, really interesting is Gold does the shit, doesn't win, but does cause the main match to end immediately. However, it causes a tie for last place, including Alara, who is at this point like set up to be / is the mastermind of this org. So you're thinking like, how is she going to get out of this one? Like how is it going to unfold? Is she going to be in any danger at all? Spoiler alert, the answer is no. She is completely fine. And on top of that, on top of escaping EC, she gets a TOL. Just really, really interesting and also chaotic. 2 of my favorite things for a main match to be. So yeah, that is my pick of the non-live orgs.
Yeah, no, that one was really good, and it was a thing to watch happen live, because I think when you're a spectator in a non-live org, you can kind of see what's about to happen, but you can't say anything, and you're like, oh, this is gonna explode in an hour, and I can't wait.
It's crazy
to see what happens. And it was just super interesting because I remember like all the people who tied for last started talking to each other and being like, so like, who are we? What are we doing here? What's the plan? Let's not DMO each other. And I think, Ilara really used being last in this main match and piggybacked and like pogo sticked off of it to be like, oh, I'm not a threat. Like I was attacked, and it like really set up her long-term game. So just fascinating the long-term ramifications of this chaotic main match. I think the other one I want to give a shout out to for non-live is main match 1 of Null Nada, which was the fight for a name, and it's this main match where you basically have to run around on a hex grid and claim basically a banner by collecting different resources for it. It was really fun to watch because Null Nada was already like primed to be super socially dynamic with all the players that were casted, and it really lived up to the hype. There were like 7 different alliance channels made in like the first few hours, and like Zatchel was somehow in all of them, and you know, PRCS was refusing to do anything in any of them, and he was going rogue. There were multiple different people trying to come up with alliances and different strategies, and there was a lot of negotiating. And honestly, the highlight of this main match to me is PRCS. He has this...
Yeah, I was gonna say. PRCS trolling was the highlight.
There's this moment where he trolls Zatchel, which is already like, okay, that's just PRCS, peak PRCS. But there's also this like super interesting gameplay decision he has to make where basically he has a lot of control over who he wants to force to be EC, and he really commits to saving Toby. And they have like a super interesting dynamic as he condemns, I believe, Brian to EC. Yeah, and so he was just like super interesting, you know. I mean, he was also like monologuing about everything and every decision he was making, and so it was just a treat to watch, honestly. And shout out to the moment where Uri kind of nudges Brian into fucking Sean over for no reason, and then Brian fucks Sean over for no reason, and then Sean screams in his thoughts channel because he's like, why is this teenager ruining all my dreams? it was really good. I don't know, it was just a really great, strong start to an org that was really highly anticipated, and I thought it was super fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Cool. Anything else, X?
I think I'm good. I think we've covered the big stuff.
Yeah. I don't know who nominated the script. That's crazy.
The game where I threw the entire time. I did not submit a single thing.
Jackson refused to submit anything because he was like, this game, I don't want to play with it. And then...
I did not want to play it.
That's also the episode where like...
Bro, you didn't want to try to figure out who like this League of Legends champion's like favorite Pokemon move was?
To be fair, I think that part is pretty cool. I do think the script gets some chops for coming up with some cool stuff. Like double elimination bracket is pretty awesome. But it's like, I don't know if it was fun to spectate because it was just like half the people
it seemed like a cool concept though.
Yeah, like half the players were throwing, the other half was just like Marcer raffle stomping until Zizek betrays me, and then Syrup just accidentally gets blasted and doesn't get a TOL. Like, I don't know if it was super engaging, but I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something because obviously I do not have full vision. So you're the only one with full vision.
Yeah, and you talk like I utilized that full vision.
So,
I have retroactive full vision. I do not have a. I did not have an alt in Spectator Lounge while MM5 was ongoing.
Good to know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, game's good, but I don't know really how I feel about it as a spectator experience when there's a lot of so many good other nominations. All right, new category again, most innovative main match.
Oh boy, oh boy.
Literally what it says, innovation, what was cool, new, most original, exciting. A lot of good ones here. I want to start by saying I think Memories of a Lost Season is super innovative. It is a main match like nothing we've ever seen before, right? I don't think there's anything that even comes close to the design space it tries to tackle. And for something that's so new, I thought it was so pristinely done, right? Every deduction made perfect sense. All the curies were super fun and interesting. And I'm pretty sure every person who played this main match or at least engaged with it seriously, was having a blast, like deducing and logicking everything out. Like me personally, I thought it was such a standout main match, and it absolutely satisfies the innovation like tag.
I agree.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Do y'all have any picks though?
I mean, like, Memories of a Lost Season was like this one of the two standout things for me. The other being the penultimate test. I just think it's pretty neat how like every round is basically an episode, and how like people die or if people get eliminated, mid main match, it affects the state of the rest of the main match. I think that's also very innovative, and I think it's like the kind of thing that only works using this specific twist of contractual obligation where you have multiple lives.
Yeah, and I think the contracts too work super well with it.
I didn't read on the contracts, but I'll take your word for it.
You could basically complete contracts per round, which meant like you could strategize for specific like second place token, right? By basically being like, oh, I'm gonna sandbag a little, but I'm gonna get the contract completed so that I can have enough shards to complete a token, which I think is like an extra level to the game that made it fun. One of the contracts was literally win a DM, and I won a DM, so I got an extra shard. Like,
that's funny.
And we planned a strategy around that. I was like, I'm probably gonna end up in the DM round 1, so I'll just pick that contract and use that contract, and then get that shard to be able to like fill in a token later. Like that was part of our strategy. So, but yeah, Jackson, do you have anything?
I was gonna say prepare or despair. You know, it's not often you see a RPG system, you know, built into a main match. I think this is probably going to earn my vote, but I think Memories of a Lost Season is also quite strong. So either of those two.
Yeah, I think it's actually been a pretty good year for innovation. I'm looking, you know, through this list, and I think a lot of these games tried new things. Some of them more successfully than others. I think I do want to give a shout out to the script, which I think has a really good and interesting premise where you basically have to rig like a double elimination bracket. And it was also kind of like a deductive or inductive reasoning, game where you had to figure out exactly how the matches are being won. I thought there were a lot of parts to this game that were super interesting and innovative, but I think the sum of all of its parts was maybe a little less than the parts themselves separate. I don't really know why that was, but I also think the script suffers from the fact that it's surrounded by a ton of main matches that are pretty similar to it. At least not in theme or innovation, but in the way they mechanically play out and the way they encourage certain alliance dynamics to form. So I think it ends up feeling a little samey when it really shouldn't. So, yeah. I don't know how you felt about it, Jackson. I know you read the rules and then refused to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think I can comment on it. I thought it was an interesting concept. I don't know how it was in practice. I'll take your word for it that it was similar in gameplay to the others that were around it.
And then the other thing I want to shout out is ID Thief from Gold's Genius Game, which, for those who don't know, was a game where every player who was still alive had to make an alt to join the server and play exclusively on their alt. And the win condition basically involved guessing which alt belonged to every player, which is such a ridiculous concept. But actually worked out.
I think it played out really well, though. It played out really well.
It played out fantastically, and I think the other big shout for it is it's a game that literally only works on Discord. Like, it's a game that only works online, right? And it uses that Discord environment super well. I thought it played out fantastically, too. So, super innovative, super awesome. Definitely, like, deserves a shout, and I'll probably be voting for it along with some of the other ones.
Yeah. That's a good shout. I forgot that ID Thief was that main match in Gold's Genius.
Yeah, that one was crazy.
Yeah, it's a really fun game.
I guess there's also the Masquerade Ball here, which is a simulacrum main match of 0 where you have to figure out who was on the cast.
That's what it was? Oh my god, I participated.
Which, yeah, you played in that one because I think I reached out to you. I was like, hey, can you pretend to be a fake player to, like, everyone else? And he was like, yeah, sure. I don't know if it's like, it's definitely innovative. It's never been done before, but
I mean, like, it was only done here because it was a meme org.
Yeah, like there was so much trolling involved because there were so many people pretending to be playing. There were people who were playing whose strategy was literally, I'm not going to talk to anyone else. Pretty good, but yeah.
Yeah, Masquerade Ball seems interesting. I think I've seen that concept, executed in a different way before. I think I also used something similar for Trophy Game 1, even though that particular game was a dumpster fire. Let's ignore that. I don't know, I think it worked out well for me, Morg.
Yep.
I can move on.
Yeah, let's move on to most fun main match, which is just the main match that was most fun to play. Everybody and their mother is nominated for this. I think there are 16 nominations. Of these, I have a few particular shouts. I think as a player, I was playing Memories of a Lost Season. It was super fun to play that one. Really engaging. I've already covered it at length in this podcast, but just super fun to logic and deduce it all out. And yeah, it was probably some of the most fun I've had, and it was actually so problematic because I joined the meme board being like, I'm not really gonna care, but the main match was so good, I was like compelled to care, and now I was.
You got shifted back to the tryhard mode.
Yeah, like it shifted me back to tryhard mode because I was like, oh, I want to figure it out. I need to figure out like who got eliminated where, what the alliances were, and I was like, oh well, that fucking sucks, but it was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Do you have any commentary on the vote main matches?
Okay, so I think probably Swap 61 is my pick for this one.
Yeah.
Again, this is a main match where I got second to last. Like, I fucking sucked at this game. And yet I still loved playing it. Figuring out ways to block other people and, like, prevent myself from being blocked. I don't know, just something about the calculations for that game were super fun. Loved it.
No, it played out fantastically, too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it played out mostly pretty well, at least for, like, the winning side. But on the losing side, Roar just,
yeah,
poor guy. I don't think he knew what was going on in that game. So he sunk pretty quickly. But apart from that, yeah, it did play out well. So, bidding seed exchange, I think is that the same as the Genius Invitational one?
Yeah, it's Kong seed exchange again.
Yeah, okay, so that game is fun as hell. I don't think it's as good as Swap 61, but it is very good. Gift exchange did not really play out well in EM Genius. Rob swapped in for Emil to play for the round, and Toby, and I just got in a room together and just immediately figured out who had the gift of the TOL. So we just solved the game instantly. I don't think it was very fun. Maybe it played out better in Gambit Game. Speed date for 8. Looks interesting. There isn't an equivalent for this game in EM Genius, so I don't know how well it was or how well it played out.
It played out pretty well. I think a lot of people also had fun deducing the rules. About the gift exchange part, the gifts for the Gambit Game version of gift exchange were kind of hilarious. So each I don't know if this is how it went down in Epic Mafia Genius. I haven't looked back, but basically each gift, they had rules, but also the rules came with a bunch of random words appended to some of them.
No, definitely
it would be
like that.
I don't remember them off the top of my head, but one of them was something about
the gift with 3 things it cannot be this gift. Also nice.
Yeah, also nice.
Mice.
And then there was one clue that was it was the number of words that rhyme with ice say something, right? So it was this whole crazy minigame, and then Spicy's clue was just nice ice spice.
That's so funny.
It was way longer than that.
It was way longer than that, but it was basically just words that rhymed with ice and nothing else. And he stared at it and he was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then he
I'm pretty sure clues are supposed to be legible. I'm pretty sure those were his exact words.
And then he showed up to socialize or strategize with other people, and he thought everybody got a troll answer, and everybody else was like, "Oh yeah, my clue is saying oh, these gifts have these things in them," and he's just sitting there being what the am I being trolled right now? He was just being gaslit that entire episode. It was so funny. I think that really influenced the way people think about it, because it's just the clues are really fun.
Yeah, okay. So I think in EM Genius, we three just got very lucky with the clue distribution. We only needed our 3 clues to solve everything. Wow. It was not like globally distributed like that. Yeah, we just got either crazy lucky or the clue design was not that good. I assume, or it seems like it was designed better in Gambit Game, which was a good thing.
Yeah, and it played out super well. And there was also like a trick to the Gambit Game version. So
yeah.
So unfortunately, we don't have any Guardians players in this call. So it's hard to say what was the most fun to play. But from a spectator's perspective...
I'll DM Toby right now.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to DM Pengu right now. He's online too. Yo, what was the most fun MM to play in ZGD? I think I know the answer to this. I asked him this when we met earlier. And Pengu, and I think probably a shared opinion of a lot of people, really enjoyed Prepare or Despair. They thought it was super fun to do all the mini games and piece together all the information. And it has a very similar kind of mechanical joy or happiness to ride as Memories of a Lost Season. Like just the...
You are taken to a different world.
Right, the energy of being taken to a different world and also being able to piece clues together about that different world and learn about it, both mechanically and narratively, I think is just really fun for a lot of people. Because it's not something we really do in Genius Orgs unless it's like fucking DAO or something. So I think that's the one everybody really enjoyed, and I gotta say, it looked like it was a lot of fun. It was impossible to spectate, but it looked like everybody was having a ton of fun the entire time, so.
Toby said, Prepare, Despair, and Essential Escape. Not necessarily in that order. But those two did seem really fun, so.
Yeah, I think Essential Escape looks really fun, and I think the concept is really sick, right?
Yeah.
This idea of exploring this haunted maze or whatever and having to piece together the map.
I think it's really, really fun. I think it's awesome. Just like as a main match itself, it didn't really work out because of the tiebreaker.
Tiebreaker was awful. The game sinks because of it. Yeah.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
But it was fun. So.
Yeah. In both worlds, everybody like kind of clocked that it was going to be an odd, like everybody's going to tie. And then it basically came down to the guy who was AFK on one side, and on the other side, the person who solved first ended up getting punished for solving first, which is just an immense feels bad in my opinion, where like the tiebreaker is super unintuitive, and if you didn't clock that the game was going to go to tiebreaker, playing optimally changes, right? Like Amy was playing optimally to what she felt was correct, which is like, oh, I'm going to solve this as fast as possible. But in the specific scenario where everybody solves, that is the worst thing you can do, right? Which just sucks. XNimus is currently giving a thumbs down.
In real life.
Yeah. I do think I can see the argument for why it was most fun, but I don't know. As a spectator, I was just really upset for Amy. So, like, I was just like, damn, this really sucks. You know?
Yeah.
Anything else Toby's saying?
Do you want me to ask if he has anything, like, specific to say about Prepare or Despair? I mean, he just said, like, RPG.
That's game good.
Yeah, game good.
Game good, man. Game really good. Yeah, I don't know. I think we covered most of these. I think those are my shouts for most fun main match. Yeah.